Stop scrolling, because this is not light family drama. This is Thanksgiving table chaos with receipts, rage, and a mic turned all the way up. Somewhere between a body-shaming insult and a homecoming night that went completely left, Karlissa allegedly called Blueface fat. Blueface fired back like his phone was a loaded weapon. And suddenly Nevaeh is caught in the middle of a family explosion that makes reality TV look underwritten. This isn't shade. This isn't jokes. This is the kind of mess that leaks out of private calls, jumps onto social media, and turns into a public spectacle before anyone can say keep this offline. One comment turns into a clapback. One clapback turns into old tea resurfacing. And then boom, a fight erupts, emotions boil over, and everybody suddenly has a version of the truth they're ready to die on. This makes the Kardashians look like they argue using indoor voices. Because when parents, exes, kids, and egos all collide at once, logic leaves the room and chaos grabs the mic. Was this concern? Was this control? Or was this just years of tension finally snapping under the pressure of a public moment? This didn't start as a spectacle. It started the way family tension always does, quietly, awkwardly, and loaded with history nobody ever actually resolved. When Karlissa allegedly called Blueface fat, it wasn't a random insult tossed into the void. It was targeted, personal. The kind of comment that doesn't just sting, it presses on old pressure points and dares everything underneath to come rushing out. Because when body shaming comes from family-adjacent energy, it hits different. Strangers can talk all day and it rolls off. But when it comes from someone who's been in the room, who knows the dynamics, who understands exactly where to aim, that's not a joke, that's a spark. And sparks don't stay small in this orbit. According to circulating clips and online chatter, the comment didn't stay private for long. It slipped into the open the way all private remarks do in this family, leaked, repeated, reposted, and immediately dissected by the internet like it was breaking news. Suddenly timelines weren't asking if it happened, but why now? Why this moment? Why this insult? Because insults don't appear out of nowhere. They show up when frustration has been simmering for a long time and finally boils over. This felt less like a joke and more like a release valve popping under pressure. Blueface didn't take it lightly. He responded, and not with humor, not with restraint, but with the kind of energy that says, if you're going to disrespect me publicly, I'm not whispering back. His response wasn't a clarification, it was a counterstrike. And that's when the situation stopped being about words. Because once the clapback landed, this wasn't Karlissa talking about Blueface anymore. This was Karlissa versus Blueface in real time, with family history standing in the background like a witness nobody wanted to call to the stand. People immediately started digging. Old clips resurfaced, past arguments got recontextualized, long-standing tension that everyone pretended didn't exist suddenly looked unavoidable. Viewers started connecting dots like they'd been waiting for this chapter to drop. But then the story took a hard left. Reports and online claims suggested the drama spilled into real-world tension involving Nevaeh during homecoming-related chaos. And that's when laughter stopped. Because the second a child gets pulled into adult conflict, the tone changes instantly. What had looked like messy adults trading insults suddenly felt heavier, more serious, less entertaining. People stopped reacting with jokes and started reacting with concern, the kind that shows up when spectators realize the fallout isn't staying theoretical. The internet didn't even need confirmation to react. The idea alone was enough. The suggestion that a fight erupted around Nevaeh turned timelines into alarm bells. Questions flooded in. Why was this happening now? Who let it escalate this far? And why does family conflict always seem to land on the same shoulders? Old tea came rushing back like it had been waiting in storage. Past homecoming drama, previous family disputes, clips where boundaries looked blurred long before this moment. People began arguing that this wasn't a sudden explosion, it was a slow-burning fuse finally reaching the end. Karlissa's supporters framed her words as frustration boiling over. They argued that when someone feels ignored, dismissed, or pushed to the edge, they don't always speak gently. To them, the insult wasn't about weight, it was about resentment finally slipping out. Blueface's defenders didn't buy that for a second. They said body shaming is body shaming no matter who says it, family or not, public insults cross a line. They argued that firing back wasn't escalation, it was a predictable reaction to being disrespected in front of millions. And just like that, the internet split clean down the middle. What poured gasoline on everything was timing. This wasn't happening in a slow news cycle. Drama pages were starving, social media was bored, and suddenly a story dropped with insults, clapbacks, old grudges, and a reported fight involving a child. The algorithm didn't just notice, it celebrated. Sarcasm exploded online. People joke that this family drama has more plot twists than a primetime soap. Others said Blueface attracts chaos like it's on a contract. Some laughed, some cringed. Many asked the same tired question: why does none of this ever stay offline? But beneath the jokes, discomfort crept in. Because insults don't disappear after a clapback. And family conflicts don't reset just because the internet moves on. Especially when kids are present and cameras are always watching, Nevaeh became the unspoken center of concern, not because she spoke, but because she didn't. Silence from children in public chaos always lands heavier than adults yelling. Viewers started questioning whether this was ever really about a fat comment at all, or whether that insult was just the trigger for deeper power struggles finally surfacing. Was this about control, about resentment, about long-standing boundaries that never existed clearly in the first place? Because when family drama goes public, it stops being about who said what first. It becomes about who gets hurt last. By the time the dust started swirling instead of settling, one thing was obvious. This wasn't ending with a single insult and a single response. The comment was the spark, the clapback was the ignition. And the reported eruption involving Nevaeh was the moment everyone realized this story had crossed into a different category entirely. Once the insult and clapback escaped containment, the internet did what it always does when it smells blood. In the water, it turned the situation into a full-blown event. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was timeline theater. Group chats lit up like emergency alerts. People who hadn't cared about this family in months suddenly spoke with the confidence of long-term insiders. Memes landed first, because memes always arrive before clarity. Screenshots with arrows, freeze frames with dramatic captions, side by side. Comparisons like the internet was building a case board out of chaos. One post painted Karlissa as fed up and finally saying what she'd been holding back. Another framed Blueface as disrespected and retaliating the only way he knows how. Louder. And just like that, the narrative split into factions. One side argued this was grown folks' business that should have never left private spaces. They said family insults are messy, but dragging them online turns tension into performance. To them, the clapback didn't defend dignity, it escalated embarrassment. The other side said disrespect doesn't get a family discount. They argued that once body shaming goes public, the response is fair game. According to them, Blueface firing back wasn't drama, it was consequence. Then came the pop culture comparisons, because the internet needs analogies to survive discomfort. People joked this family drama had more recurring storylines than a long-running sitcom. Others said it felt like a reality show where nobody signed release forms but everyone still got exposed. Someone compared it to a boxing match where the bell never rings and the crowd keeps screaming for more rounds. But the mood shifted again when Nevaeh's name stayed in the conversation. Not as a participant, as collateral. Once viewers realized a reported fight erupted around a homecoming moment, the jokes thinned out. People stopped laughing and started asking why every major blow-up seems to land during moments that are supposed to be normal, celebratory, and safe for kids. Celebrity reactions didn't come directly, but they came loudly in code, vague posts about protecting children, subtweets about keeping family drama off the internet, cryptic comments about boundaries. Nobody said names, but everybody knew exactly what they were referring to. Silence would have looked suspicious, so everyone spoke, just not clearly. Drama pages went into overdrive. Old tea resurfaced like it had been bookmarked for this exact moment. Past homecoming incidents, previous family arguments, clips that once felt random suddenly looked like foreshadowing. People stitched timelines together like conspiracy boards, claiming this was never about weight. It was about power struggles that had been simmering for years. The sarcasm sharpened. Some joked that Blueface exists in chaos like it's his natural habitat. Others said Karlissa airing frustration publicly felt less like shade and more like years of resentment finally slipping the leash. The humor was biting. But underneath it was discomfort, because no matter which side people landed on, one truth became impossible to ignore. This didn't feel accidental. The timing felt loaded. The words felt intentional, and the escalation felt inevitable. The outrage cycle spun fast and ugly. One hour people defended Karlissa's frustration. The next hour they condemned body shaming. Then sympathy for Blueface. Then criticism for responding publicly. Then concern for Nevaeh. Then exhaustion from the entire spectacle. And through all of it, nobody slowed down. Nobody said, maybe this shouldn't be content. Because once the algorithm decides something matters, restraint becomes invisible. Reaction videos stacked up. Think pieces multiplied. Everyone wanted to be first, loudest, or morally superior. Parenting debates erupted from people who don't know the family but felt qualified to judge every move. The situation stopped being about what happened and became about what it represented. To some, this was proof that unresolved family issues rot when exposed to public attention. To others, it was just another example of how fame amplifies bad communication into public disasters. And the most unsettling part was how quickly empathy turned conditional. People supported whichever adult matched their bias and treated the child like a talking point instead of a person. The internet didn't just watch the chaos, it shaped it. As the noise grew, the original insult almost faded into the background. What mattered now wasn't who said fat or who clapped back harder. What mattered was that this family drama had crossed into a zone where consequences don't reset after the timeline refreshes. Because once a child becomes part of a public argument, even indirectly, the story never returns to just drama. It becomes a reference point, a shadow that follows every future interaction. And by the time the internet started asking what happens next, the answer was already uncomfortable. Nothing cools down after this. It just waits. The insults were said, the responses were made, the old tea was reheated, and the eruption around Nevaeh ensured that whatever came next wouldn't be received with patience or benefit the doubt. When the noise finally dipped, it didn't sound like peace, it sounded like tension holding its breath. The kind that settles in after something crosses a line and nobody knows how to walk it back. The insult had already landed. The clapback had already echoed. And the reported eruption involving Nevaeh had shifted the story into a space that doesn't forgive easily. Karlissa walked away from the initial moment with a reputation that split audiences clean down the middle. To some, she looked like someone who finally said what she'd been holding in for far too long, frustration spilling out in an ugly but honest way. To others, she looked reckless, choosing body shaming as a weapon and lighting a match in a room already filled with fumes. Once that perception set in, it didn't soften, it hardened. Blueface didn't escape unscathed either. His response, loud and unapologetic, fed into a narrative people already had ready. Supporters said he defended himself against public disrespect, refusing to swallow humiliation just because it came from family-adjacent energy. Critics said he escalated a volatile situation instead of de-escalating it, adding fuel where restraint could have changed the outcome. Either way, the internet doesn't reward nuance, it brands. And then there was Nevaeh, the quiet center of the storm, not because she spoke, but because she didn't. The reported fight around her turned everything heavier. Once a child becomes part of a public narrative, even indirectly, the rules change, jokes feel inappropriate, hot takes feel invasive. And suddenly people realize they're watching real consequences unfold. Not just entertainment. Public perception shifted from amusement to discomfort. Casual viewers who initially clicked for drama started asking harder questions. Why does family conflict always spill into public spaces? Why does it keep landing during moments that should be safe for kids? And why does nobody ever seem to pull the plug before it gets this far? Old tea didn't stop resurfacing. It stuck. Past arguments were no longer old news. They became context. Patterns people claimed they'd been pointing out all along. Screenshots circulated like evidence, stripped of nuance and pasted into new arguments. Once a narrative like this locks in, every future interaction gets filtered through it. Industry watchers notice quietly. Not because they care about family feelings, but because volatility has consequences. Public mess attached to kids doesn't age out of memory the way petty beef does. It lingers. It complicates partnerships. It makes people cautious behind closed doors even when the internet moves on. And the internet did move on partially. The meme slowed. The outrage cooled. But the story stayed lodged in collective memory like a bruise that hurts every time it's touched. Any new post, any live, any caption from anyone involved now arrives with suspicion baked in. The benefit of the doubt didn't shrink, it vanished. Here's the uncomfortable clarity that settled in once the dust stopped rising. Nobody actually won. Not emotionally, not reputationally, not relationally. The only thing that gained ground was attention. And attention doesn't protect families or repair trust. It magnifies mistakes and freezes people in their worst moments. This moment exposed something darker about internet culture. When real family conflict collides with fame, pain becomes content whether anyone agrees to it or not. Vulnerability turns into thumbnails, arguments become arcs, and children become talking points instead of people who deserve quiet. The aftermath wasn't explosive, it was lingering, a low, constant pressure that shows up every time someone dodges a question, posts a vague caption, or goes live with. The comments turned off. The story didn't end, it learned how to wait. Speculation shifted toward what happens next. Will there be apologies, distance, another confrontation down the line? Or will silence become the strategy while resentment keeps building off camera? History suggests these situations don't resolve cleanly. They pause, they reload, they resurface when attention gets bored and tempers haven't cooled. And the irony nobody likes to admit is this: the original insult barely matters anymore. That was the spark, not the fire. What burned was years of unresolved tension, blurred boundaries, and family dynamics stretched thin under public scrutiny. This wasn't about one comment or one response. It was about control versus emotion, pride versus restraint, and what happens when family issues are handled with an audience watching and an algorithm applauding. As the internet scrolled to the next headline, one truth stayed behind like a shadow. This moment changed the way every future interaction will be read. Nothing from here on out will be seen in isolation. Everything will be measured against this eruption. Because when family drama becomes public spectacle, it doesn't cool off, it calcifies, it becomes reference material, and it waits patiently for the next trigger. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the point where the story stopped pretending it was just jokes. And everyone watching knows the same thing. Whatever comes next will land harder, be judged faster, and be forgiven slower. Now let's stop pretending this was just another messy headline, because if you made it this far, you already felt the shift. What started as an insult turned into a family explosion, and once kids' pride and public egos collide, nothing ever resets clean. This wasn't entertainment. This was a warning shot dressed up as drama. So smash that like button like it owes you money. Because if this story had you shaking your head, laughing uncomfortably, or thinking this went too far, then it did exactly what chaos always does. It pulled you in. Likes tell the algorithm we're not ignoring what really happens when fame meets family. Drop a comment right now and be honest. Who crossed the line first? Was it the insult, the clapback, or the fact that this never should have been public in the first place? Don't play neutral, say it with your chest. This comment section is where the real debate lives, not the watered down takes. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button immediately, not later, not after the next blow up, right now. Because fame flaws doesn't sugarcoat celebrity, chaos, or hide behind PR-friendly narratives. We break it down, call it out, and expose how fast things spiral when nobody checks the ego before pressing post. Turn on notifications too, because family drama doesn't send calendar invites. One caption, one live, one off-camera moment is all it takes to light the fuse again. And when it does, we're already locked in. Remember this: insults fade, screenshots don't, apologies get forgotten, patterns don't. And once family drama becomes content, it never truly leaves the timeline. Stay sharp, stay observant, stay right here. This is Fame Flaws, where celebrity chaos isn't just messy, it's exposed. It's exposed.